With that said, we probably should get to Rogan, right? I mean, that's fairly significant news. Joe Rogan has COVID. If anybody has heard, he posted this on his Instagram story. He says he contracted COVID-19 while on the road, and it was unclear whether or not he is vaccinated. I guess it's still unclear. He may be withholding that information for purposes of maintaining the audience he's so carefully cultivated, specifically in recent years, and it's become more and more this kind of audience. But he did reveal that he's taking a variety of things, including ivermectin. Let's take a listen to what he had to say on his Instagram story, and then we can talk about it a little bit more.
Hello, friends. So I got back from the road Saturday night, feeling very weary. I had a headache, and I just felt run down. And just to be cautious, I separated from my family, slept in a different part of the house, and throughout the night, I got fevers and sweats, and I knew what was going on. So I got up in the morning, got tested, and it turns out I got COVID. So we immediately threw the kitchen sink at it. All kinds of meds, monoclonal antibodies, ivermectin, Z-Pak, prednisone, everything.
So, by the way, when he talks about Regeneron, is that what he said? Or yeah, whatever the monoclonal antibody treatment that he was receiving, that is incredibly expensive and really hard for regular people to access, but he has a ton of money, so he's able to, one, sleep in a separate wing of the house, separate part of the house, and then have a Regeneron treatment that he, God, is that the name of it? Whatever. The monoclonal antibody treatment that he received, which is not accessible to a lot of people. And then, of course, he promotes the famed, infamous ivermectin, where people are taking it on a regular basis and shitting out their intestinal lining.
Wait, can we just go back to the clip about him?
But if you think about it, though, he probably has the legit human version, because he obviously probably has a doctor with the hookups, right?
Yeah,
to get
Dr.
the actual.
Will hook him up. Yeah.
Right. And
so
everybody else.
He's not taking the disgusting horse paste. He's taking the actual ivermectin that humans can take that has no clear COVID-19, effects.
Seems like a bit of overkill, though, because not to minimize having COVID, but I had COVID, and I didn't just go out the moment I got it and was feeling shitty and just start taking literally everything in the drugstore. So it's kind of weird that he's goes from being this holistic guy who you don't really need to get vaccinated, because if you're young and healthy or fit or practice karate or whatever, you can you'll just ride it out. But the moment there is some sort of magical cure out there, suddenly you should be taking it even if you're not sick, because that'll prevent it or something. It's a very weird pivot to make.
Yeah,
right.
Can you play that clip of him talking about his vaccine, how he says it's crazy to get the vaccine if you're healthy?
Right. Let's play this clip. And I should mention, the Regeneron thing actually works, but the rest of the stuff, that's actually medicine. And so is the vaccines. Vaccines work too, but this was how he presented and framed the vaccine conversation.
Here's my main problem with it. There's a lot of people that have gone through COVID already, and they have natural immunity, and they're telling them they have to be vaccinated too. But that's not logical. It's not rational, and it's not supported by science. This doesn't make sense.
No, none of it makes sense. And Trudeau just announced the other day that all government employees essentially were going to have to be vaccinated to work.
What about government employees that have gotten COVID and recovered?
Exactly.
And have antibodies.
But also, you can't say you can only have a job, i.e., you can only survive if you get this vaccine. I mean, why is this legal?
Well, not only that, it's not really a vaccine in the traditional sense. A vaccine is where they take a dead virus and they turn it into a vaccine and they inject it into your body so that your body fights off, it develops the antibodies, and your body understands what that is, whether it's the measles or polio, it knows how to fight it off. This is really gene therapy. It's a different thing. It's your body, it's tricking your body into producing spike protein and making these antibodies for COVID.
Yeah, that's not what that is. And by the way, that's him on with Megan Murphy, who is an anti-trans activist. So clearly,
also, if your issue, right, the good person to have on for medical expertise, right? But if the mRNA vaccines are the real issue, if that is your issue, that you want the traditional vaccine. Yep. I mean, that's the Johnson & Johnson one. There is one like that. Go out and get that one then.
It's insane. Like, yeah, that's such, like, there is a non-MR vaccine, because all Rogan is interested in is the fear mongering, the fear factor of it, right? Like, that's what.
Well, he'll eat a scorpion, but he's not gonna take the gene therapy mRNA vaccine, right? Like, dude, as you say, Matt, just take the J&J one, or advocate for just the Johnson & Johnson one on your program. I will take that, but don't loop all of the vaccines in the same group or whatever, right? If he wants to make that kind of statement.
You're going to act like you're so precise about how you classify
exactly. And then don't just like say you're throwing the kitchen sink at everything in your body when you are at the same time on your programming advocating for precision in treating a novel coronavirus, which we now know is mitigated to great effect by these vaccines, which have now been taken by hundreds of millions of people. But really what he's doing is appealing to the narcissism of his viewers who want to feel like they have the access to the secret knowledge and different treatments that circumvent what the general consensus is telling them, and then it provides them with some sort of semblance of agency. And if he has taken the vaccine and is still doing all of these other things, which like we don't necessarily know, it makes it a bit more unconscionable that he's not being upfront about it.
I don't want to come down too hard entirely on like the idea of folk science or like folk medicine or like herbalism or something. But to me, this strikes me as incredibly inconsistent. Like if he had said that statement, when we just watched, and then had like once he contracted COVID, gone into a yurt and like meditated for 5 days and was like, yeah, no, I sweated it out. I don't believe in pharmaceuticals. Like, we just took a bunch of like mushrooms and we just sweated it out. And now I feel, better about the whole thing. I know you can have a respect for that kind of consistency. This is just like people who think they believe in science sometimes, but like don't really, but really just want to try like find a middle ground where they can cobble together like this pseudo expertise in what are legitimate scientific fields. I suppose just be like, okay, I believe in herbalism. I believe in like taking echinacea or something. No, I want to like sort of straddle the mid ground of like, no, I believe in pharmaceuticals, just not the ones that you're being told to take, but, a separate one.
Nailed it. Like, I'm pretty sure ivermectin, we all know ivermectin is produced by Merck. Taking it and purchasing it is not necessarily sticking it to big pharma, and doesn't square with a general skepticism about pharmaceuticals or drugs that are manufactured by them, if that's what you're going for. All it is a way to carve out some special niche for yourself in the midst of a global pandemic where we need collective action on treatments and vaccinations. And I don't buy anymore that he's just like wide-eyed and taking in all of this information and bushy-tailed and just like naive and having these people on his program because he's interested in ideas. This is a specific project at this point.
I mean, he might be interested in ideas, but only very specific ones, right? You can have a very specific band of ideology that you're interested in, and being, more or less willing to listen to both ends of that narrow span and, with no attention paid to the distribution of how many people are at one end versus the other is not so impressive. Like that's just the entirety of the basis of our kind of like the faux diversity within our political media system, that sometimes we have on literal Nazis and sometimes we just have on people who sort of think that we should cull a population, right? It's the illusion of diversity.
One side and one other side.
Merck really took one for the team, if you believe this conspiracy theory, though, because not only did they have a drug that apparently could fix all of this if only the dastardly doctors would unleash it, but also they lost the sweepstakes for developing their own COVID vaccine. So they let all their competitors, like, not only do they forego that PR victory of, by the way, check out our stuff that's usually made only for horses but has some human applicability, but we're going to forgo that PR victory because, why do we care about that as a pharmaceutical corporation? But we're going to let all of our competitors then develop the real vaccines for this stuff. Like, Merck, real team player in the oligarchy of pharmaceuticals.
I also want to make sure that we don't miss that he also said how if you had COVID, you don't need the vaccine. It's requesting that is not supported by the science, when literally like every legit doctor I've heard has stressed, if you had COVID, you do have some antibodies, but it's not the same. It's not that same amount of strength you would have.
And we don't know
if
when
you got the vaccine.
We don't know when it goes away. Your antibody protection, and it could vary from person to person.
Right. It's like saying I got the flu 10 years ago. I don't need to get flu shots every year.
Well, they probably don't get flu shots anyway. So
yeah.
And all that is like you can reduce it down to the fundamental component, which is be afraid of the vaccine. And that's what he's messaging there.
Yeah.
Right. It's really easy to find out if these guys took the vaccine. Like, it's super simple. We saw it with like every single like conservative that's come out and wouldn't answer the question. If your audience is a bunch of anti-vaxxers and you won't say you did or didn't take the vaccine, then you took it, because you wouldn't hide that you didn't from anti-vaxxers. That's your base. You want to make them happy. So the idea that like, it's my medical, it's my private. No, these guys would never. If they didn't, all the ones who didn't take the vaccine and have that anti-vaxxer base, they're out loud and proud saying, I'll never take it. I won't take the vaccine.
Yeah. Ryan from Michigan, Joe Rogan, I have COVID, so I threw the kitchen sink at it. Headline tomorrow, reports of concussions due to sink impacts rise nationwide.
Who talks like that when it comes to getting sick? Like, I've gotten sick many a times and I've never thrown the kitchen sink at it. Like, you just like, I got sick. I guess I'll sleep it off and maybe take some like Tylenol, or maybe I got to go to the doctor and get like, I don't know, amoxicillin or whatever they give you. It's been a while. Who the hell says like, I immediately went out and had to get 50 different medications to put in my body? It's so weird to describe it like that.
Well, Matt, Joe Rogan's a tough guy. That's why you can tell, because he's like starting to like age into looking like Dana White. So, when he gets sick, if it wasn't serious, he wouldn't have mentioned it. So he has to really overperform being sick. He can't just have a bit of a cough. He has to like need gene therapy to deal with his bit of a cough. Otherwise it's, why would he even mention it?
I know, when I'm really, really sick, the first thing I do is go outside and film myself underneath a tree. Like, why wasn't that taken in bed if he was so ill? What a weird guy. What a weird guy.
I had a bit of a stomach virus this weekend, and the first thing I did was like just periscope me just over the toilet, like, hey, fans, Chad V here. Blah.
I don't know if it was the lighting too.
Like 7-Up, got some saltines here.
I meant to buy saltines, and I forgot. Each time I went to the store, I was like, oh, man.
I don't know if it was the lighting too, and just I guess the way his skin reflected, and that bald head I'm sure helped or whatever. But he sort of looked like deep faked or like a 3D model or something. Something was off about how he looked.
Maybe, that's a great point, Matt. Maybe they have replaced Joe Rogan with a deep fake.
It's the Avril Lavigne situation. It's not her anymore. Yeah. It's they've done what they did with Paul McCartney, and they're doing what they did with Avril Lavigne. It's a replacement, Joe Rogan.
If you play Skater Boy backwards at exactly 3/4 the speed, you hear they've replaced me with a clone in like the track.
Those are my favorite conspiracies. There's one for
Mad Men, help us, save us.
There's one for Andrew WK. There was one for the Ultimate Warrior in the WWE back in the day when he left for a few years and he came back. And because he was wearing a baseball cap and had his hair in a ponytail, everyone assumed it could not be him, even though it looked exactly like him, but wearing a baseball cap with a ponytail.
I saw like a little story the other day about like Bruce Willis allowing Russia to deep fake him for commercials. And I think that's probably going to be the bulk of what deep faking is used for in the next 100+ years. Because at the end of the day, what does pretending somebody is somewhere or saying something that they're not really going to accomplish in the long run, except for some very narrow situations where, that person has no alibi. Like, like everyone's going to know that Joe Biden didn't give like 8-minute long like rant of like a Hitler speech at a certain point. So it's like, it's mostly going to be like people being de-aged years to be in movies, like Michael Caine looking like a 20-year-old.
I don't know, man. Have you seen like just this past week, we had the whole thing where Biden apparently fell asleep while meeting with the Israel prime minister. Right. It was fake. I mean, and they didn't even have to like digitally alter it. They basically just cut out a small portion of the clip where he closed his eyes and looked down to listen to the guy and cut it. And like immediately after they cut, he then turns to him and responds. So, I mean, people do things like that when they are listening to people.
Yeah, that technology definitely already exists.
Context of the Biden clip. So they just cut off the context before Biden responded.
Yeah, they just basically cut a moment where he decided to close his eyes,
being there for a longer period of time. Like the image of him closing his eyes was in reality not that long, but he they multiplied it, I guess.
Right.
Technology to like make videos a little bit misleading have existed for a long enough time where people have kind of mastered the bulk of what they're going to be deceived by. I think the large amount of deepfakes are just going to be like really weird, cool things. I will say, Biden falling asleep in that meeting made me like him more. So in the end, it didn't even work. That's propaganda.
I actually don't think the threat from deepfakes isn't from something like that happening and triggering something like a coup of the government. In my opinion, I mean, I think that's what like the right wants from these sorts of deepfakes. I think the actual utility that powerful people are going to get from deep fakes is when something real actually does come out, they can say, actually, this was a deep fake. And I didn't actually say that. I think that's why I'm wary of adding to like the sort of freak out about the coming deep fake era. Cause I think really what you're going to see is more often than not, like a journalist releases something and people question the validity of it in a way that only experts could figure.
I mean, we already have that's good.
We already have like a very basic version of that though, wherever like someone's text messages or like emails get out and they just go like, "Oh, I was hacked."
Hacked my account. That's exactly what I thought of. And in fact, that's a great point, Matt. I want to go back in time and make that the reason I was what's what I'm looking for. Cautiously optimistic about the possibilities around deepfake because yours was way more thought out than mine. I was just like, nah, it's gonna be Bruce Willis looking 50 forever.
Folks, there's more of what you've just saw where that came from. That's if you hit the subscribe and like button. Thank you. Really, thank you.